Good morning, students. This is the last part of the essay, the last lesson. So, in my last video, I have discussed up to this portion, means I not just give you a holiday. So, now I am going to read out from the next paragraph. So then, from one thing to another, M. Hamel went on to talk of the French language and saying that it was the most beautiful language in the world, is the clearest and the most logical, that we must guard it among us and never forget it, because when a people are enslaved, as long as they hold fast to their language, it is as if they had the key to their prison. Then he opened the grammar and read out our lesson. I was amazed to see how well I understood it. All he said seemed so easy. I think too that I had never listened so carefully, and that he had never explained everything with so much patience. It seemed almost as if the poor man wanted to give us all he knew everything before going away, and to put it all into our head at one stroke. So, what the author said in this paragraph. So, just before this paragraph, what we have discussed? We have discussed that when M. Hamel asks little Franz to recite the rules of participle, at that moment Franz, means little Franz, remained silent, and he did not able to speak out a single word about the rules of participle. At that moment the teacher did not scold little Franz. Instead, the teacher confessed that his parents and he means M. Hamel himself, were at fault, means they were the responsible for the situation of little Franz. Then after that, what happened? M. Hamel here said that then from one thing to another. So first of all, M. Hamel started the class with the announcement of the Order of Berlin. Then after that, he asked the student about the rules of participle. Then after that, he blamed himself as well as the parents for not anxious about the children's education. And finally, here in this paragraph, what happened? M. Hamel now going to speak about the French language. According to M. Hamel, French was the most beautiful language in the world. It is the clearest and the most logical language. You see here, it is the clearest and the most logical language in the world. So that's why he asked the people of the France that they should guard their language among themselves and never forget it. So why he plead to the people of the France not to forget about their language? According to M. Hamel, language works just like the key. You see here, just like the key. When a people are enslaved, as long as they hold fast to their language, it is if they had the key to their prison. So M. Hamel compared their French language with the key to the prison, because now the people of the Alsace and Lorraine, now they are going to be ruled by the German people. So in that case, if they know their mother tongue very well, then they could come out from the prison of the German people, and they again, if they want, then they can resettle down in another one district or in another one place of the same country. So if they don't know how to speak, how to write their own mother tongue, then they have not accepted by the people of the French if they wanted to settle down in other places. So that's why M. Hamel requested or plea to the French people that as French is the most beautiful language, so they must guard it among themselves, and they should protect it among themselves and never forget about their own mother tongue. So after that, what happened? Then he opened a grammar and read us our lesson. I was amazed to see how well I understood it. All he said seems so easy, so easy. I think too that I had never listened so carefully, and that he had never explained everything with so much passion. It seemed almost as if the poor man wanted to give us all he knew before going away, and to put it all into our head at one stroke. So after that, M. Hamel take out one grammar book and read out the same topic, means the rules of participle, and now he explained to the student about the rules of participle. At that moment, little Franz, or the author, was amazed. He was shocked, or he was surprised at himself, for he understood the lesson very well. Also, he thought that M. Hamel had never explained before today the lesson more patiently, and even he also never tried to give his attention towards the M. Hamel. Little Franz felt like that. So at the same time, little Franz felt that the poor M. Hamel, he wanted to give everything to the student, whatever he knew about the French language, means since the last 40 years experience about the French language, as well as about the knowledge of French language, he wanted to give to the student in one single stroke, means in one particular class. And at the same time, he wanted that students should keep everything whatever he taught on that particular day inside the classroom in their heads. So after that, after the grammar, we had a lesson in writing. That day M. Hamel had new copies for us, written in a beautiful round hand, French Elsec, French Elsec. So after the lesson in the grammar, now M. Hamel going to start again a lesson about the writing. So that day M. Hamel brought new copies for the student or for the others who were present in the classroom. So in that pieces of paper, what was written? French Elsec, repeatedly in round way. So in it was written in a beautiful round hand, French Elsec, repeatedly. Then they look like little flecks floating everywhere in the schoolroom, hung from the rod at the top of our desks. You ought to have seen how everyone set to work and how quiet it was. The only sound was the scratching of the pens over the paper. Once some beetles flew in, but nobody paid any attention to them, not even the littlest ones, who worked out right on tracing their fish hooks, as if that was French too. On the roof, the pigeon cawed very low, and I thought to myself, will they make them sing in German, even the pigeon? So what happened? As soon as the student get their pieces of paper, which were written French Elsec repeatedly, so they started to write down. And at the same time, what happened? The pieces of paper looked exactly like little flags, means the national flag of a country. It's floating everywhere in the classroom. It's hung from the rod at the top of our top by their desks. So at that moment, one ought to have to see that how everyone set to work, and everywhere there was calm and quiet. Nobody talked to each other at that moment. So only one sound came out from the classroom, that is what? The sound of scratching of the pens over the paper. So suddenly what happened? One insect, which is known here beetlejuice. So one insect type beetlejuice, once it flew inside the classroom. So at that moment, the environment of the classroom is exactly like the pin drop silent. Nobody talked to each other. Everybody head down and engage themselves on writing friends accept repeatedly on the same pieces of paper. So that's why they didn't notice about the big loose sound. And who work right on pressing their fish hooks as if that was friends too. So it's the actions of the people inside the classroom. It seemed exactly like they are went out to catch the fish with the hook, because when someone went for the fishing with the hook, especially at that moment, one need very calm and quiet environment. If there arose any kind of noisy sound, then fish will not come and you cannot catch them. So in the same manner, by remaining silent inside the classroom, it seems like that the French people wanted to get back their two lost district, that is Alsace and Lorraine here. Then suddenly what happened? Little Franz heard the pigeons cawing very low. And at that moment, little Franz wondered or thought, will the German be also mad to sing the pigeon in German language? Little Franz questioned to himself. So will they make them sing in German, even the pigeons? Oh, these German people even also mad to sing the pigeon in their language instead of French. Little Franz thought to himself like that. So I believe you understand what I am telling in this paragraph. So next paragraph, what happened you see. Whenever I look up from my writing, I saw M. Hamel sitting motionless in his chair and gazing first at one thing, then at another, as if he wanted to fix in his mind just how everything looked in that little schoolroom. Fancy, for 40 years he had been there in the same places, with his garden outside the window and his class in front of him. Just like that. Only the desks and benches had been worn smooth. The walnut trees in the garden were taller, and the hoopvine that he had planted himself twined about the windows to the roof. How it must have broken his heart to leave it all, poor man, to hear his sister moving about in the room above, packing their trunks, for they must leave the country next day. So then what happened? Little Franz wondered about the sound of the pigeon. So when he was wondering about it all, he noticed that after completing his writing, he noticed that whenever little Franz looked up to the teacher after his writing, he saw that M. Hamel, the teacher M. Hamel, was sitting motionless in his chair. Then he noticed that he was gazing at one thing or the other. Means, first of all, he noticed inside the classroom, and then he noticed outside the classroom. So little Franz said that fancy, means imagine, this teacher M. Hamel, he has been working in the same school since the last 40 years. So after working 40 years in the same place, now the time came to leave the place permanently. So how the situation is heartbroken. Now you imagine yourself. So in these 40 years, what happened? Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed except the desks and benches. You see, except the desks and benches, and the chairs becoming worn out, and all the hoopvine trees and the walnut trees, they were now growing taller, means they became fully matured. So The narrator Little Franz wonders that it must be heartbroken. For whom? M. Hamel. Because after living permanently 40 years, now he has to bid goodbye the place, or he has to leave the place baggage. So that makes him ultimately heartbroken here. So in that 40 years, what happened? All the desks, all the benches and the teachers' chairs all became worn out, and such kind of trees which were planted by M. Hamel, that is like the walnut trees and the hopvine trees, they were became growing taller. So it seems ultimately heartbroken to leave M. Hamel here. So at the same time, Little Franz heard that M. Hamel's sisters already started packing their luggage in the trunks in the above room of the classroom. Because why she was packing all their luggage in the trunk? Because tomorrow they will leave the country permanently. That's why. So though M. Hamel was broken internally, but M. Hamel is an epitome of patience that day. At the same time, a patriotic to the core in his character also we can see. So then what he did, you see, but he had the courage to hear every lesson to the very last. After the writing, we had a lesson in history, and then the baby chanted their ba, be, bi, bo, bo. Down there at the back of the room, old Hauser had put on his spectacles and holding his primer in both hands, spelled the letters with them. You could see that he too was crying, his voice trembling with emotion, and it was so funny to hear him that we all wanted to laugh and cry. Ah, how well I remember it, that last lesson. So, M. Hamel, in this paragraph, what happened? M. Hamel was very patient that day, as I told earlier. So, when it was the chance of the babies to chant the alphabet, like ba, be, bi, bo, bo, means the alphabet of French language, even the old villagers joined in. So at the same time, what happened? The babies are chanted the alphabet, and the elders are taught by M. Hamel the lesson of history here. So at that moment, what happened? Little Franz noticed that the old man whose name is Old Hauser, who brought the old primer in the classroom on the day of the last lesson. Now again Little Franz noticed that the same person whose name is Old Hauser, again he held it open, the old primer, with both with his hand. Again he started to read out or spell out the letter from the old primer by wearing his spectacles. So at that moment he was crying, that's why his voice was trembling with emotion. So when someone read out or speak out any word during his or her crying moment, at that time their voice are always trembling. So that voice seems to be so funny at that moment. So the same thing is happening with here Old Hauser. So when he was read out the letters from the old primer, at that moment finally he was cried up. So at that moment his voice was trembling with emotion, and that seems so funny to hear, but nobody able to laugh after hearing that kind of such funny sound. I mean, everybody compelled to cry along with Old Hauser here. Old Hauser, along with Old Hauser here. So how well I remember it, that last lesson. So Little Franz, throughout his whole life, he never forget the day of the last lesson, which is given by the M. Hamel, and the environment of the classroom on that particular morning. So all at once the church clock struck 12, then the Angelus. At the same moment the trumpets of the Persian returning from drill sounded under our windows. Hamel stood up very pale in a chair. I never saw him look so tall. So then what happened? As soon as the church clock struck 12, so in front of the school there is a church. So as soon as the church clock struck 12, now it is the end time for the school. Only 12 o'clock the German people has given to the people of Alsace-Lorraine to teach their last lesson in their school. So as far as the order, now the class is going to be over here. So as soon as the church clock struck 12, then what happened in the church? The Angelus started. Angelus is the prayer song sung by the Roman Catholics. So in 12 o'clock in the church, the prayer song started, which is known here as a Angelus. At the same time, what little Franz heard? So he heard the sound of the Persian soldiers who were drilling in the open field back of the shore mill. So after completing their drilling or their marching, now they were returned back to their regiment, and their walking sound entered through the window into the classroom, and that was heard by little Franz as well as others who were present in the classroom. So Hamel also knew very well that now the time is over. That's why he stood up from the chair. At that moment he looked very pale. Pale means obscure, colorless, glazeless. He looked yellow, pale, sharp at that moment. His face looks graceless. His face looks full of emotion. His face looks or indicate very sad. So now finally he stood up from the chair. He looked very pale at that moment. At the same time, Franz noticed that before that he never saw Hamel that much tall. So in physically how much actually tall Hamel, that was only known by little Franz. On that particular moment he was stood up from the chair where he looks very pale. So then what the teacher do here? My friends, said he, I, but something choked him. He could not go on. So after standing from the chair, Hamel addressed like my friends. After addressing my friend, he wanted to say something. I, but just saying I, something choked him. He could not go on. He could not spell a single word after only pronouncing or only spell out I. Then he turned to the blackboard, took a piece of chalk, and bearing on with all his might, he wrote as large as he could, Vive la France. After that, what happened when he was unable to speak out a single word, only after saying I, then what he did? He just took pieces of chalk, turned to the blackboard, and he started to write as much as he could to write in large. That is Vive la France. Vive la France means long live France, means France Jindabad. He write like that on the blackboard. Then he stopped and leaned his head against the wall, and without a word he made a gesture to us with his hand. School is dismissed, you may go on. So after writing on the blackboard Vive la France or Long live France, what Hamel do it? He just leaned over his head against the wall, and he could not spell or pronounce a single word. Only with his body language, only with his hand gesture, he informed to the insider of the classroom that the school is dismissed, you may go on. So after leaning his head on the wall of the classroom, He could not spell out a single word, and finally he could not stop over his emotion. He cried out, so he could not speak out a single word. So to sum up the story, we can say that the story is a wake up call for all those people who keep on postponing things endlessly. Means we should not keep anything for tomorrow. If we postpone our things, our duty, our work for the tomorrow, then these things should be happen to everyone, as today the French people felt here. So something like this happened with the natives of Alsace. So they had to forego learning their mother tongue. Means the French people, they have lost the opportunity to learn their mother tongue only because of their negligence. So this is the author explained in this story. So in the same vein, the story also extra plots the fact that war makes man inhuman and insensitive to the feeling of others, as the German people did with the people of France here. So like that the stories end out, and as I told earlier, in this story what happened, the narrator, means Alphonse Daudet, who is none but little Franz in the story, wanted to show the whole experience of his childhood, what happened in their country France, how they were humiliated, how they were suffering after losing their 2 districts at the hand of Germany, means after the loss of the war, and how that result brought the pathetic situations to the people, and at the same time he provide one moral of the story, and at the same time he provided one message to the reader. So now I hope you understand very well about the story, so you well prepare for it. For today, thank you. I'm stopping here.